I'm John Williams, owner and winemaker of Frog's Leap Winery.
Well, I thought I was winemaker.
No.
I'm Rory Williams, technically in charge of vineyards and bossing this guy around in the cellar whenever I can.
Hey, you know, this is kind of fun because it's the first time we've done this in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually it's just...
You are live, right, Scott? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
Usually we're just in the closet somewhere.
Yeah, but be careful here.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. But we're excited today to talk to you about a couple of our upcoming new releases that are going to be in your next fellowshipment.
Yeah, absolutely. So going to start out, we got
and I'm dying for a little glass of something here.
We've both of us have been up since about 2 o'clock this morning. We're in the middle of harvest right now, and so we're in need of a glass of wine, and I hope you guys can join.
This may be our busiest day of the year, actually. Yep. We've got all kinds of things coming in. We got the Sauvignon Blanc. We've been rocking that for about a week now. Our first Zinfandel came in today, and we got a shipment of some of our first grapes for the flycatcher for 2024. So we must have a couple hundred tons in so far.
We'll have 200 tons in as of today.
As of today.
Yeah, so we're rocking and rolling, dude.
We're having fun.
And speaking of, we've got the 22 Concrete Aged in front of you. The 24 version of this is currently bubbling away in some of the concrete eggs that we could see if we could see through walls, like Superman, which I don't, can you? Yeah. No X-ray vision in the family. So
that's good.
It's really exciting stuff is coming in, and we're building the 24 version of this wine.
I haven't had this since we bottled it, I don't think.
It's delicious stuff. You know, to give you guys some context of kind of how we approach this wine, the Concrete Age isn't, it's fermented in the concrete eggs that we have, aged in that concrete, but really what it is, it starts off as a selection that my dad and I are doing out in the field.
Be honest, you selected. It's too early in the morning for me. You could come in with little things on all the bins that I have to keep straight.
So we select the different, really going about the, because we're doing a lot of the sampling and we know what kind, what pieces of the vineyard. So this doesn't just mean whole vineyards or even the individual blocks, but often rows or sections of rows within certain blocks that are performing particularly well that we love, and bring those in, and those are what get the concrete treatment essentially, and get the time and what we feel has the depth necessary to develop into what we love about this wine. Which, how would you go about describing Concrete Age? It's different than our Grand Cuvée or our regular Sauvignon Blanc that we've been making for 45 years. In a way, it's kind of stripping away some of the overt fruitiness of that wine and some of the what you might consider what you expected out of a Sauvignon Blanc, and it's stripping that away to a certain degree, but what gets revealed is this savory mineral kind of core of Sauvignon Blanc, which is that's where I love to live with Sauvignon Blanc.
Well, and I don't think you should discount the effect of the concrete act to the egg. I mean, because this is this idea that the lees stay in suspension and give extra body and richness to the wine without any extra heaviness.
Yep.
And I'll tell you the moment that it really kind of inspired me was when we were at La Doucette in Sancerre and tasting out of those big tiled rooms and tasting Sauvignon Blancs, the Baron that were 8-10 years old, and just the richness of those wines, and yet they were still light and fresh. And we can do that, damn it. And I think that's what's exciting. Yeah.
I think that's what's kind of fun about it. The 22, normally this is just a blend of our Williams Rossi vineyard and the Chavez Leeds vineyard, which have some of our oldest Sauvignon Blanc
I was noticing
wines.
that we got some Galleran fruit in this.
Yeah, so for the first time this year, if you guys haven't seen this before, but because you've just been too busy drinking the wine straight up, check out the back label, which has all the different blocks that we've selected for this particular year. And if you are paying probably overly close attention to this stuff, you'll notice that a little bit of our Galleran vineyard is shaded in this year. This is the first time.
Is that the old block?
Block 4 East Old. So
is old vine a thing here? Because it seems like that's the way it's kind of playing out a little bit.
I think
older vines.
Older vines.
Yeah.
I would technically call old vine being 50 years older, which we don't have any. Almost have some 50-year-old Sauvignon Blanc, but not quite yet. But we use older as a distinction in this one vineyard where there are some newer vines. And I think it is playing a role, Dad. I think as these wines, especially as they become mature and they become fully rooted, something I noticed just smelling this wine right now is it has a little bit of a pop of tropical fruit, which is sort of like, around here is like we've got all the alarm bells going and oh my God, what did we do wrong? But there's something interesting to me about, and it speaks to that concentration or richness without heaviness, where normally you would associate tropical fruit with this kind of over-the-top alcoholic, maybe even a little bit sweet and oak and all this kind of just pizzazz and nonsense with Sauvignon Blanc. But I think that's part of what comes out of these mature vines, these deeply rooted vines that we're selecting, is often they'll have that kind of rich, layered, kind of surprising aromatics without being over the top, while having their natural acidity and having all of this balance to go with it that just makes it an interesting wine, full stop. And that's what's kind of cool to come out of it, because the concrete helps inculcate that in the wine and bring it out of.
What was that word?
Inculcate. Yeah, come on, read a book.
Are you
Dad.
kidding me? Are you trying to say something else, or is that an actual word?
I went to college, you see, so yeah.
I graduated from college.
I was too busy reading books. But it allows this kind of element to grow and transform in the wine. How does it do that? With the concrete specifically keeps lees in suspension for longer than it would in a barrel or a stainless steel tank, adds richness, builds this kind of aromatic depth and complexity without having to resort to the familiar tricks around here, which is a lot of oak, a lot of sweetness, a lot of ripeness and alcohol. And instead you just get something that kind of plays both ends of the stick in a way and just becomes something totally unique.
A word about the 22 vintage, which was a unique vintage, really the last of this round of drought years, really, when you think about it, 20, 21, and 22. Not as severe as 21, which was really droughty, but we got some rain in 22. But the vines were still reacting to the 21 vintage here, right?
Yeah,
because the crop was down.
Crop was down in 22 from our average. In Sauvignon Blanc specifically, it was still a rise after the crazy low vintage of 2021. And that was a welcome respite, but it really didn't get back fully to normal until 2023.
It was a nice summer, though. We had a great summer. Then
great summer.
It got picked before the heat.
Yeah.
We had that heat dome or whatever the hell it was. That was no fun.
Yeah, 2022 is marked by a huge heat spell, but that really only... we had picked all of our Zinfandel, all of our Sauvignon Blanc by the time that heat came in. Speaking of which, we have 22 Zinfandel to taste alongside here.
So a 22 white wine and a 22 red wine. Obviously what we're doing with the Concrete Aged Sauvignon Blanc is giving it a little extra time, not only on its lees, that's almost a full year on its lees in the concrete, and that's really developing this depth. But this gets some time in the bottle too. And it's hugely critical to have that extra time to really knit and come together, particularly with a wine as complex as the Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
But 22's in, yeah.
22's in, this is, so brand new release on this. Wow. And Dad, this really speaks to what you were saying. So again, the last of the three kind of consecutive extreme drought years. And it was really interesting in 22, we'll go back to 2021, all the varieties were down. Merlot was down 60%, Sauvignon Blanc down 60%, Cabernet took a big hit. Zinfandel kind of just seemed to ride right through it. Like, well, what's going on here? Sounds like Zin's got more in the tank and it's gonna ride this drought through no problem. Mm-hmm. The consequences for Zin came a year later. 2022 was our lowest production Zinfandel of all time.
Well, it's kind of the vine said, you didn't give me any water last year, I'm not gonna give you any grapes this year.
Yeah, it's sort of like, delayed reaction in a way, where everything else kind of popped up a little bit with the slightly increased amount of rainfall in the 21-22 winter. Zinfandel just continued its kind of slide downward, and it didn't pop back up even to normal levels until 23. So it's kind of this, it took it longer to lower its yield into that drought, but it also a little bit longer to recover. It was kind of an interesting reaction.
This is going to be a drinker.
And, 2022, the memory that I have from 2022 is a crazy heat wave that hit about mid-September.
Yeah, that was nasty.
And we'll get to that when we talk about the 2022 Merlots and Cabernets in a while in a future session. The upshot of the Zin is that we had it all picked. We knew this heat dome was coming, so we rushed to make sure all this stuff was in, bubbling away, safe from the crazy heat. When I say crazy heat, it was above 110 for a week, which nobody likes, including vines.
Yeah.
But really, 2022 during the year was a warm, dry, but not extreme year until that one heat dome event. And so the Zin is beneficiary of a warm year which develops generous fruit, but the drought conditions lowered the yields, and you get a lot of kind of upright posture to the wine, a lot of great structure to the wine, which for me is what builds great Napa Zin, is this sense of acidity and tannin structure. And that's coming both from the year and the reduced yields, but also the very large amount of Petit Syrah in this wine.
Well, and I was going to mention that because, this is classic Frog's Leap Zinfandels. We learned a long time ago that to get Zinfandel to taste more like Zinfandel, there needs to be less Zinfandel in it. And by that, we mean it is the co-fermentation with Petit Syrah and Carignan that allows us to actually get a deeper expression of Zinfandel. I know it's a little counterintuitive, but the idea is that we can allow the Zinfandel to stay on the vine longer and really develop that beautiful, the fruit in this is amazing. But if you leave it on the vine too long, the alcohol gets up and it interferes with the character of the wine. And that's where the Petit Syrah and the Carignan come in. We actually harvest that earlier. We cold soak it. It's much lower in alcohol when it's fermented out. So it lowers the overall effect of the alcohol in the Zinfandel. And I think allows Zinfandel to be more like Zinfandel. Is that strange?
No, I think that's right, Dad. It's funny because Zin, what is Zin supposed to do, right? Is a good question. We have to ask ourselves that when we're thinking about making the wine. Well, you know everything. So, whereas I'm
teaching.
For me,
it's
the journey. It's the unanswered
I don't want to give it all at once. I'm just parsing it out a little bit
just
at a time.
chill, all right? And so what
would knock me off if I give you everything at once.
Actually, when we were in Antioch today, we pulled in. It kind of looked like this sprawly wasteland, and I was like, "Well, why don't you get out of the truck? I'm going to leave you here and take over the winery."
And I almost did.
There was no getting back from there. Nothing against anybody who lives in Antioch, by the way, except save yourself.
Or if you're in Antioch, go visit this unbelievable vineyard that we looked at today.
Yeah, we saw this beautiful 135-year-old vineyard down there. So
me.
Super cool. Yeah, you were just a lad. Yeah. Getting back to what were we talking about?
I don't know. I have no clue. You took it over, and you bring it home, baby. In a different life, you're like the Statler and Waldorf in the Muppets. I don't normally get up this early. You kind of forced me into it today.
He did take early shift today, so I took ultra early shift, but he took early shift.
Yeah.
Zin is like this. We just started picking Zinfandel today, and there's this sense of when you're picking Zinfandel that it should be these bombs of flavor from the height of harvest, and it should be this capturing the height of summer and all that generosity and warmth. But you don't want to get sunburned. You don't want to get heat struck. And so it's this sense of like when you're picking the fruit, the wine or potential wine is at its apex, and everything you're trying to do with the wine after that is to try and preserve that moment in time. So the co-fermentation with Petit Syrah, it's not about adding Petit Syrah flavor to the wine or some sort of reductive calculation. Oh, we need this many phenolics and this much tannin and blah blah blah. It's about.
Hey, what are all you people doing back there? Wave to the camera. We're in a live studio audience here.
Yeah, exactly. So instead, it's about adding.
What were you saying?
Yeah, you're so helpful. It's about adding this kind of these layers and this barrier to preserve that freshness and uplifted character. This wine gets about 70% aged in concrete. It sees very little, but very little.
You mentioned that, but boy, it's become the way we make Zinfandel now. We talked about it all the time, but this wine is aged in concrete, and the depth this gives to the flavor. We're on a roll with Zinfandel. I actually never thought. I've been hoarding the 21 because I just love that wine. I may buy some of this and just drink it and save some of the 21 for the cellar, although I don't know that this isn't going to age well. This has a little more, I don't want to say feminine character, but a little more.
No, it's definitely more floral, kind of spicy. I still think it has that really nice kind of tannic. It's not a tannic wine, but instead it has this kind of beautiful floral underlying structure to the wine that I don't know.
If you were thinking of buying 5 cases of this, I really recommend getting an extra 5 to age just to see, because I do think this is good as a drink.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a drinker, but I think, it's got some nice character and a good vintage. This could be fun. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of fun. It's fun thinking about the concrete, because we started with our concrete aging experiment in the Zinfandel in 2017.
I'll never forget the day we tasted those side by side with the barrel samples, and just kind of, I looked at you and you looked at me, and so she looked at Pablo, and we all went, holy.
And I looked at the floor. But it was this, 2017, which we'll talk about the 2017 Cabernet within this context. But 2017 was a difficult year for Zinfandel. It was hot. Zin didn't like the amount of kind of crazy heat spells that we had during the year, and we were seriously concerned about the integrity of the wine, its ability to be fresh and uplifted. But we had started aging in concrete in 2017 started with that wine. We had bought these cubes. It was a bit of an experiment. And honestly, the concrete has a way of kind of, again, similar to the Sauvignon Blanc, preserving that kind of freshness, stripping away some of the overripe character, the raisiny, the porty, which we're not fans of and don't want in the wine. And instead, the concrete tended to preserve, in a way, that sense of freshness and uplifted aroma in Zin. And I'll say it straight out, saved our 2017 Zinfandel.
Should we refer to anything 16 and younger as BC, before cubes?
Before cubes, yeah, I like it.
Wow, we might be on it. We should tell the marketing department. Do we have one?
Yeah, Dad, I believe we have a waste paper basket in the office for all of your puns that they all
You're hurting my feelings. You should pour me some wine.
We send the email to Jessica and the team, and they just print it out, and it goes straight into the shredder, I believe, as it prints out.
Waste of paper and my good puns, which are amazing. Yeah. I'm looking forward to this. This was as Rory has alluded to, a vintage that it will be seared in our memory for years to come. It was almost the end of the age of innocence, in that this was the start of our realization that climate change was bringing us these things like heat domes and fires. The 17 was the first fire. What was that? The glass. What was the fire that year?
This is the Atlas fire and the Tubbs fire. Yeah.
And we're thinking, well, we're down here in the Center Valley. We were not affected by the fire, but what we weren't counting on was that the smoke from the fire can actually can get into the wines. And so we were on a steep learning curve. You did amazing amounts of research while I was working.
I think it's worth telling the whole story of 17 in a way, because this was...
While I drink this, you go ahead and tell that story.
17 was a crazy year. It was, sometimes we get asked about, was it a good vintage, a great vintage, a bad vintage? And I often feel like our vintages don't really fit into that that vernacular, that paradigm of like, oh, it was the way they talk about Barolo vintages or Bordeaux vintages, where, oh, it was a great year, oh, it was a terrible year, and we'll adjust things accordingly. Napa vintages just have different, kind of challenges and different rewards. 2017 was a lot of challenges. It was, so the story...
Are we overselling this wine? Yeah.
Well, I want to tell the story because I want to get a sense of why, despite how challenging the year was, it remains probably the most satisfying wine for me that we've ever made. Because it was like, I was in the vineyards starting in about, I would say late May, early June. We started getting a series of heat waves. And when we say heat waves, this is stuff over 108, 109 degrees.
What year did you start in the vineyards? 12?
Yeah, 2012.
2012, yeah.
It's actually my anniversary a couple days ago. So thanks for noticing, by the way.
Yeah, I'll send you some flowers.
But it's so you have this kind of roller coaster of crazy heat waves. And what does that do to the vines? It stresses them out. Honestly, when we started bringing in these grapes, it was very challenging because we'll talk about the fires in a second, but we were almost completely done with our harvest before the fires, and we had 85% of our Cabernet grapes in. And so really the story about this Cabernet is writ with these heat waves that just kept coming over and over again. And really messed up the grapes to a certain degree. They looked fine, but they came in and we started fermenting them and they started extracting, and we would taste them out of the tank and go, oh my God, this is tannic.
Yeah.
We're not, you guys, if you know Frogsley, we're not a winery where we just hit the big button over and over again with Cabernet Sauvignon, trying to make it as big and tannic and rip your teeth out as possible. And we were faced with some seriously tannic, chewy, unforgiving wines that were also, difficult to balance. And it was extremely challenging from that perspective. The blending sessions around the 17 were pretty crazy. And so moderating that extraction, bringing in, trying to find the right way of not just giving it a light treatment in the cellar, which doesn't.
Did we put some Merlot in this?
We did. I was going to get to that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It was actually
the story.
it was actually part of the whole build-up to the grand finale.
Oh, shoot.
But why don't you talk about
it? No, you go right ahead. I'm just going to. This is delicious.
But it was so we did bring in a little bit. This very rare for our Cabernet. We blended in a little bit of our Estate Merlot.
That's right.
In order to soften the palate on the wine, because we were concerned about how tannic it was. Then the fires came. The fires came when we were about 85% through, and we
panicked.
We had no idea what we were doing. I didn't panic.
Well,
You panicked.
Yeah.
I was in complete control, cool as a cucumber. But it was we were kind of in the great unknown of what does smoke do, what do fires do, trying to figure things out. There was some research in Australia, but nothing here. What do you do about this? We started picking some of the cab that was not ready yet early, assuming that it would be better to get it off early than late. That was actually the cab, not because of smoke taint, but because of how early we picked it. About 15% of our Cabernet production was declassified, bulked off, and sold to some.
Declassified is
a nice word.
A really nice word for getting rid of this shit because
it's no
not
good.
bottling it on label.
Because we do, despite all appearances, we do have standards here at Frog's Lake. And so it's, we didn't want to have this wine that reflected either the crazy ups and downs of the summer, but still had had the carbon, had a mirror image of that, because that's terroir. That's what the year was like. But how do you arrive at something delicious and compelling? And I think we got there with the 17. I think this wine.
I think you did too.
Is fruity and delicious and shows no effect from smoke. And we've confirmed this now that we know more. We've confirmed this over the years with additional testing and historical benchmarking and lots of stuff that I won't get into, but it's tons of fun. But instead, it just remains this kind of, the 2020 Cabernet is very similar in this respect, where it's almost these years that are not the ones where if you Google best vintages in Napa, 2017 is not going to come up. 2020 won't come up. And yet they remain the most compelling vintages for me, the most satisfying vintages to not in the moment, but in the end, make. And certainly once they're in the bottle, they remain these kinds of encapsulations of what was difficult and ultimately rewarding about a year. And so that's the 17 in a bottle is.
What I was going to say, if I could get a word in edgewise.
No, you can't. Sorry.
Sorry. Is these actually are the vintages that define wineries.
Yep.
And we know this for anyone who collects wines and ages wines, that the best chateaus, the best wineries will not release a wine that isn't up to their standards, even if they don't release anything. And it's a little bit of our promise to you is give us a tough vintage, we will make a great wine or we won't bottle it, right? And I think that is a sacred trust that we have with you all, because you guys are the ones who support us, our fellows. And so I'm excited about this wine. I think it's the Merlot in there is kind of interesting, a little extra richness across the palate. You were starting to work with barrels a little more intensively, and a lot going on here, and quite a bit of sacrifice in terms of wines that were declassified and not used in the bottling of this wine. We won't tell you what happened to them, but you will.
They showed up in a $20 Napa Cab blend near you somewhere.
So, yeah. If you want to know where all that shitty wine goes, you got to go find something that costs about $15 or $20, and you'll be good.
But to me, the wine remains this kind of, it's starting to develop into its kind of secondary phase, where it's developing the depth and the kind of complexity that we love, that we search for in Napa Cabernet. and has that herbal floral and spades, but with some rich red fruit. To me, just a delicious wine and well poised to go a long ways.
I might just need to see how this is aging a little bit. Yeah. How are you doing?
I could use a little more.
Yeah, I think you're driving this afternoon. You only drink red wine.
I could use a roadie, actually. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Hey, I wanted to point out there's something really cool
Yeah.
that's going to be in your shipment, and or I think it's cool anyway, is Megan and the fellowship team dragged out this letter that was the enclosure in our first shipment of frog wine back in October of 2009. And that was the first ever fellowship shipment. And they found the letter that I wrote that went with the shipment, and they showed it to me, and I said, okay, I'm going to write another one. So in your next shipment, you'll see these two letters side by side, 15 years apart. And I think it's kind of interesting to see what has and what hasn't changed over the 15 years at Frog's Leap. And if you want to know more, there's a hidden message in this scribbly stuff down here. And it's kind of like playing a record backwards. What is this thing?
It's exactly like a phonograph, yes.
Is that right? Yeah. And so there's all kinds of stuff in there.
Yep.
And what I guess we can say is you've got some amazing wines coming in the next shipment. These are wines that you can drink. These are wines that you can age. And you should do both and enjoy. Yeah.
Cheers.
Let's get back to work.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, you guys.